So let's talk Afrobeats. Because one day the world woke up and said, wow, this is everywhere. Movies, fashion shows, award stages, commercials, your gym playlist, your cousin's wedding, and the internet said Afrobeats blew up. Which is interesting because Afrobeats didn't blow up, it grew up publicly, globally, under a lot of pressure. So tonight, I want to tell you how that actually happened. Not as a hype story, not as a trend piece, but as a story about culture, patience, and transparency.
Across oceans and continents, threads of light carry stories of movement, memory, home. In every shared meal, every quiet act of persistence, we are connected. This is the global thread.
First, quick clarification because this matters. Afrobeats is not Afrobeat. Afrobeat is singular. It's fella, for example, political, revolutionary, protest music. Afrobeats, plural, is something entirely else. It's pop. It's club music, it's youth culture, it's diaspora sound, and it didn't start as a global strategy. It started as people making music for themselves. Late 2000s, early 2010s, we are thinking local radio, street CDs, parties. Speakers are way too loud. There's no marketing plan. Nigeria is pushing out volume like a factory that never sleeps. Ghana is layering melody and highlight into everything. Cote d'Ivoire is bringing club rhythms that didn't care about the language you spoke. Senegal is grounding the sound in percussion and performance. Cameroon is moving between genres like rules were optional. Nobody was asking, will this chart in the US? They were asking, does this bang? And that's important. Because when music is made for joy, not approval, it doesn't arrive polished. Guess what? It arrives alive. Now, here's the part that the chart always forgets. Afrobeats didn't go from Africa to the world. Let's map it out together. It went Africa, diaspora, internet, world. We are thinking London clubs, Toronto parties, you name it. Before playlists had names, DJs broke records. Let's give them their flowers because they really did that. Before the charts did, friends shared songs. Before algorithm did, Spotify didn't make Afrobeats global. Spotify just counted it. Between 2017 and 2022, Afrobeats stream grew over 550% globally. Not because of one hit, but because the music kept showing up in people's lives. That's why charts lagged behind reality. And they weren't even leading the movement. Let's be real, they were really documenting it after the fact. Now, eventually, somebody had to tell Billboard. In 2022, Billboard launched the US Afrobeat Songs chart. 50 songs, weekly ranking, which sounds official, but really what it meant was we can't pretend this isn't happening anymore. Because Afrobeats wasn't charting due to a breakout moment, it was charting due to persistence. Songs stayed, streams stayed, demand stayed. One song sat at number one for 59 weeks. It's Calm Down, the remix by Rema and Selena Gomez. Another stayed there for 55 weeks. It is Water by Tyler. That is not a trend. That is rent being paid on the charts. The continent carried volume and melody. The UK acted as the bridge. The US provided skill. This wasn't about one artist. It was about the ecosystem. The charts didn't crown Afrobeats. Let's just confirm this. It literally just understood what listeners already knew. Then something changed. Afrobeats moved from being something you searched for and it became something you just heard. In 2023, Afrobeats passed 14 billion streams on Spotify. 14 billion. That's not niche. That's infrastructure. Spotify recorded hundreds of millions of global discoveries. People finding Afrobeats on purpose. Streams in Latin America jumped over 400%. Brazil alone, nearly 500% growth. When your music becomes background sound for global storytelling, you are not just on the playlist anymore, you are in the culture. This is where Afrobeats stop being international music and becomes these mainstream adjacent. Now, this is usually the part where our nosy energy peaked, because when Afrobeats went global, it didn't just get streams, it didn't just get charts, it didn't just get stages, it got mess. Let me sit down for this. When people started asking a real question, isn't this mess hurting Afrobeats? And you can imagine the mess. But let's actually walk through what was happening. Because to me, this wasn't chaos, it was pressure meeting visibility. Before Afrobeats went global, competition existed, but it was quiet. You dropped the song, people danced, life moved on. But once Afrobeats entered the global charts, competition became quantified. Who charted higher, who charted first, who stayed longer. Fans stopped just enjoying the music. They started tracking numbers. Every release became comparison. Every achievement became a debate. And suddenly, supporting an artist felt like defending a position. Not because people became toxic, but because there was finally something to win on a big stage. So you don't get fan wars until there's a scoreboard, right? And then comes the beefs. And on the surface, it looks like it's personal. But underneath, I think that they were really about representation. Who speaks for the genre? Who opened the door? Who gets invited into which rooms? As Afrobeats artists started performing on global stages, one artist's success started being read as the genre's success. And that is really heavy to carry. Because suddenly, one quote could define the culture. One performance could be overanalyzed. One omission could feel political. These weren't just disagreements. They were symptoms of a genre asking, who are we now that the world is watching? Fan wars, again, weren't just random either. Fans weren't just arguing about music. They were arguing about pride, ownership, whose story is being centered, and whose wasn't. Afrobeats had become the site of identity. And when identity gets involved, people defend harder. This isn't new behavior. It was just happening on a much bigger stage. And then the romantic headlines, because nothing confirms you crossed over like the internet caring who you're dating. Suddenly, who you were seen with mattered, who you were photographed with mattered. Proximity itself became content. That's not distraction. That is pop culture. Nobody tracks your love life unless you've entered some next level celebrity territory. Now, Afrobeats artists weren't just musicians anymore. Again, they were public figures. And then came the moments that went viral, like an interview clip taken out of context. Before, those moments could stay local within the country or the continent, but now they became international conversations overnight. Not because artists changed, but because visibility did. Afrobeats didn't get messier. The spotlight just got brighter. And all of this, the competition, the beefs, the fan wars, the headlines, the viral moments, was happening at the same exact time. Afrobeats was being recognized in rooms it had never been allowed to before. While people are online arguing, Afrobeats artists were appearing on The Daily Show. They were sitting on couches on The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon. They were opening sets at Coachella. And that matters because those platforms aren't about trends, they are about cultural acceptance. They signal this sound is no longer dissident, it's part of the conversation. And then there was the moments that quietly said everything. It's my favorite part. This is when the United States former President Barack Obama dropped his summer playlist, and you could see Afrobeats artists everywhere on that list. Now, that playlist may not have moved the charts. It did, it didn't, we don't know. But what it did for sure is that it moved status. It tells a certain audience this is global taste now. And once that happens, the stakes changes because recognition doesn't just bring opportunity, it brings scrutiny. Today's Afrobeats is not a moment. It's an industry. It's a reference point. It's a feeder genre shaping pop, dance, and hip hop. The question isn't will Afrobeats be included? I think the question are now who owns it, who protects it, and how does it evolve without losing itself? Because Afrobeats didn't knock on the global door, it built its own house and the world moved in. Afrobeats grew in front of all of us, maybe with us, under pressure, under attention, under expectation. And in the process, it became more than music. It became a way for African diasporas to recognize themselves, to stand in arenas, to sing in their languages, dance to rhythms that have lived in their bodies for generations, and celebrate how far those sounds have traveled. So, if it feels loud, if it feels imperfect, that's Afrobeats reality, the OG personality. That's the culture stepping onto the world stage. And I think good for us and good for Afrobeats.